Good morning, Grace and friends. Today's sermon is called The Gentle Ones Who Inherit the Earth. Some scholars think that the Beatitudes build on one another step by step, leading to the next. First step being poor in spirit, knowing your need of God. Second step being the mourners who can mourn their sin, their losses, and the sufferings of the world. Third step today, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I've called the Beatitudes building blocks of the church as a community of the kingdom of God. Perhaps too much of a mouthful. But what if the Beatitudes were the bylaws of the church? We'd be the kind of church Jesus wants. And we'd be closer to Jesus as he leads us each on our own spiritual path. What does it mean to be meek then? Certainly not weak. And what does it mean that the meek will inherit the earth? Is that just so much wishful thinking? The plunderers of the earth and the invaders of the lands seem to have the upper hand way too often. So let's take another look at the gentle ones who inherit the earth. The way the Beatitude is translated by most as blessed are the meek. It's just too bad that meek rhymes with weak. Charles Wesley's well-known 18th century hymn has made the unfortunate association, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Since the 18th century, the interpretation of the Beatitude has associated meekness with a kind of weakness. Qualities like being passive, quiet, non-assertive, inoffensive. If Jesus were these, he'd never been strung up on a cross. We get the message, don't be loud, don't be pushy. Especially women get that message. But there's a truer, better way to look at meekness. One problem is that the Greek word here, pays, is hard to translate with one English word. I like the word gentle much better than meek. But what does the kind of gentleness Jesus blessed look like? It looks like Jesus, who was described as gentle and who described himself as gentle. The one who spoke this beatitude lived it. So let's take a look at the kind of gentle Jesus was. We begin with one day in his life, Palm Sunday. He rode into Jerusalem on a lowly donkey, not on a war horse and chariot, a donkey. He came as Zechariah prophesied it, a king coming humble and mounted on a donkey. He came as servant king and servant Messiah. But then he went to the temple and turned over the tables of the money changers and drove them bodily out. He was challenging the way the temple had become complicit with the powers that be, as they crushed the poor and oppressed, as the temple had become a den of thieves, robbing the people of God. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. The gentleness of Jesus was strong to defend the weak and the most vulnerable in our midst. So let's explore more about the kind of gentle Jesus was. Some of the most beloved words of Jesus were these. Come unto me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am gentle, the same Greek word, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. His yoke was not the kind that piles laws and rules on you till the breaking point. His yoke was not harshness in response to people's sin. He teaches us to be gentle with ourselves as he was gentle. His was a yoke of gentleness. What is this yoke? I begin with this. It is a restraint of one's own power so that it does not hurt or damage others. There are holy uses of power and unholy uses of power that abuse and dominate and attack people. There are humane and inhumane uses of power, which we see so heartbreakingly today in Ukraine. On a personal level, it means not to strike back. It means to refrain from returning evil for evil. We need the help of Jesus as our yoke partner to help us with this kind of restraint. Picture a first-century cart drawn by 2 oxen. Jesus shares the yoke of gentleness with us and helps keep us on the path. Every day we have the choice to be gentle or angry in response to others. A gentle teacher does not humiliate a student in class. A gentle boss or supervisor does not speak harshly to those under his or her supervision. A gentle parent refrains from angry outbursts toward their children. A gentle person does not put a person in their place. Someone gossips about you, you do not retaliate by bad-mouthing them. Think about the times you were tempted to strike back or strike out in angry words and action. It often comes when our pride has been punctured or our integrity has been questioned. We lash out when the idol of our perfect self is threatened. Parker Palmer, the Quaker educator and author, writes about leading from within. He defines a leader as anyone who has the unusual capacity to shed their light or their darkness on others. Most of us have some sphere of life where we have such leader-like responsibility and capacity. In the home, at school, at work, in the community, as we try to be leaders in the community, at church. We need to do our inner work so that we maximize the light we shed and minimize the shadow or the darkness. Your shadow self is full of pride and anger and envy. It is always ready to defend itself. When you find yourself overreacting, giving an outsized response to what someone has said or done to us, it is time for shadow work, a time of inner examination, what AA calls a fearless moral inventory. On the other hand, when we act out of our true self as the beloved of God, we can be gentle. I've always been touched by this description of Jesus using the prophet's words about the true servant of God from Matthew's Gospel. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice. He will not wrangle or cry aloud in the streets. He will not break a bruised reed or quench a flickering wick. He is about the strong work of justice, but in this pursuit, he will not break a bruised reed or quench a flickering wick. There are days when all of us are bruised reeds or flickering wicks. Jesus will not break the bruised reed, will not quench the flickering wick of us. Every day you encounter people who are bruised reeds and who are that day flickering wicks. Will we treat them with the gentleness of Jesus. Professor Kristen Colbert-Demez has written a brilliant book called Jesus and John Wayne. She documents how for 75 years the evangelical movement has created a Jesus in the mold of John Wayne, the uber masculine macho Jesus, full of swagger, who helps them defeat their evildoers. There was a movement this century that was called muscular Christianity, a bit of overreaction to gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Gentleness is its own kind of strength. First, it is the strength of self-restraint. Paul writes to the younger Timothy, "For God did not give us a spirit of timidity." Gentleness is not timidity, but of the spirit of power and love and self-control. The Spirit helps us master our darker impulses, helps us in our desire to be gentle, as Jesus was gentle. We have also seen the power of gentleness in the nonviolent movements against injustice and oppression in India and the United States and South Africa. Gandhi and Martin Luther King sought to follow and implement Jesus' teachings in the Beatitudes and in the Sermon on the Mount, as they led their own movements of nonviolent resistance to systems that oppress. Gentleness seeks for nonviolent social change, as the ballot box is an instrument of nonviolent social change. The violence of revolutions just revolves. Jesus is breaking the unending cycle of retribution. Nonviolent movements of social change are gentle forms of strength. Meek does not mean weak. It is a form of strength. It puts God's kind of power in motion. Now let's turn to the second part of the Beatitude, "For they shall inherit the earth." What can this mean? It seems only a dream in face of those who plunder the earth and invade land after land. When Jesus was offering this beatitude, he had Psalm 37 in mind. The Psalms were his song book too. Here are some passages in the Psalm. "Trust in the Lord and do good, so that you will dwell in the land and enjoy security. Commit your way to the Lord and God will act. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. But the meek will inherit the earth and delight themselves in abundant prosperity." So, follow the ways of God. Refuse to adapt the violent means to do God's work. We try our best to fret not so easy some days. We trust in God. In his book, The Strength to Love, Martin Luther King wrote, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." So how do we, gentle, inherit the earth? To inherit the earth does not mean to own it. It means to enjoy it, to love it, to care for it. For some in America, the goal is to have almost no public land and all private land, which means a nation of private land only owned by the wealthy few. That would turn our land into one great big "do not trespass" sign. But what if to inherit the earth means to love it, to live gently upon it, to look and see every day what a gift it is from God, the land as gift, not as possession. The poets of God help us see the world anew and give us hope for the future. The poet May Sarton, in a poem called New Year Poem, writes, "Let us step outside for a moment as the sun breaks through the clouds and shines on wet, new fallen snow and breathe the new air. Let us step outside for a moment among ocean, clouds, a white field, islands floating in the distance. They have always been there, but we have not been there. Let us step outside for a moment. It is all there, only we have been slow to arrive at a way of seeing it. Unless the gentle inherit the earth, there will be no earth." Wendell Berry writes in a novel about Andy Catlett looking at a master farmer at work. He had his horses working easily in harness. As he plowed his land, he set his rows considerately upon the hills. Perhaps a good description of gentle is to live considerately with others and with the land. Blessed are the considerate, for they will live well with others and with the land. Berry writes a poem of hope about the world, a hope that can come as we live gently upon it. So let yourself envision with him a vision. If we have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing, enriching it, if we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or heaven, then a long time after we are dead, the lives our lives prepare will live. Their houses strongly placed upon the valley sides, fields and gardens rich in the windows. The river will run clear as we will never know it, and over it bird song like a canopy. On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, stock bells in noon shade. On the steeps where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest, an old forest will stand, its rich leaf fall drifting on its roots. The veins of forgotten springs will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields. In their voices they will hear a music risen out of the ground. They will take nothing from the ground, they will not return, whatever the grief at parting. Memory, native to this valley, will spread over it like a grove, and memory will grow into legend, and legend into song, song into sacrament. The abundance of this place will be health and wisdom and indwelling light. This is no paradisal dream. Its hardship is its possibility. Here is what it means to inherit the earth. Jesus is calling a new kind of person into being. How about you? Amen.